The Colour Out of Space by H.P. Lovecraft. West of Arkham, the hills rise wild. There are valleys with deep woods that no axe has ever cut. There are dark, narrow rivulets and glens that where thin brooklets trickle without ever having caught the glint of sunlight. And on the gentle slopes there are farms with squat, moss-coated cottages brooding eternally over New England's secrets. These are all vacant now, the wide chimneys crumbling and the shingled sides bulging perilously. The old folk have gone away, and foreigners do not like to live there. It's not because of anything that can be seen or heard, but because of something that is imagined. Old Amy Pierce is the only one who still remains or ever talks of those days. It began with the meteorite. These were not haunted woods, and their fantastic dusk was never terrible until the strange days. Then there had come that white noontide cloud, the string of explosions in the air, and the pillar of smoke from the valley far in the wood. And by night all of Arkham had heard of the great rock that fell out of the sky, bedding itself in the ground behind the well, at the Nahum Garner place, that trim white house amidst fertile gardens and orchards. That July and August were hot, and Nahum worked hard haying in his 10-acre pasture across Chapman's Brook. Winter came early, it was very cold. In February, the McGregor boys from Meadow Hill were out shooting woodchucks not far from the garden place, and bagged a very peculiar specimen. The proportions of its body seemed slightly altered in a queer way, impossible to describe. Its face had taken on an expression which no one had ever saw in a woodchuck before. The boys were genuinely frightened and threw the thing away at once, so that only their grotesque tales of it reached the people of the countryside. In May the insects came. Nahum's place became a nightmare of buzzing and crawling. Most of the creatures seemed not quite usual in their aspects and motions. Their nocturnal habits contradicted all former experience. The gardeners took to watching at night, watching in all directions, at random for something, they could not tell what. Strangers had come into everything growing now. No one was surprised when the news of Mrs. Gardner's madness stole around. It happened in June, about the anniversary of the meteor's fall. The poor woman screamed about things in the air which she could not describe. Something was taken away. She was being drained of something. Something was fastening itself on her that ought not to be. Nahum did not send her to the county asylum, but when the boys grew afraid of her, and Tedious nearly fainted at the way she made faces at him, he decided to keep her locked in the attic. By July she had ceased to speak and crawled on all fours. Before the month was over, Nahum got the mad notion she was slightly luminous in the dark, as he now cleanly saw was the case with the nearby vegetation. It was Amy, one of his rare visits, who first realised that the well water was no longer good. Tedious went mad after a trip to the well. He'd gone with the pail and come back empty-handed, shrieking and waving his arms, and sometimes lapsing into an inane titter or a whisper about the moving colours down there. Nahum let the boy run about for a week until he began stumbling and hurting himself. Then he shut himself in an attic room across the hall from his mother's. On the 19th of October, Nahum staggered into Amy's house with hideous news. Death had come to poor Tedious, and had come in a way which could not be told. 3 days later, Netta burst into Amy's kitchen in the early morning. It was little Mervyn this time. He'd gone out late that night with a lantern and a pail for water and had never come back. There had been a frantic shriek from the yard then, but before the father could get to the door, the boy was gone. For over 2 weeks, Amy saw nothing of Nahum, and then worried about what might have happened. Paid the gardener place a visit. It was quite dark inside, for the window was small and half obscured by the crude wooden bars, and Amy could see nothing at all. The stench was beyond enduring. Before proceeding further, he had to retreat to another room and return with his lungs filled with breathable air. When he did enter, he saw something dark in the corner. Upon seeing it more clearly, he screamed outright. A second later, he felt himself brushed as if by some hateful current of vapour. A blasphemous monstrosity confronted him, which all too clearly had shared the nameless fate of young Tedious. Commencing his descent of the dark stairs, Amy heard a thud below him. A feeble scratching on the door downstairs now sounded distinctly, and Amy's grip tightened on a heavy stick he had picked up in the attic. Slowly nerving himself, he finished his descent and walked boldly towards the kitchen. But he did not complete the walk because what he sought was no longer there. It had come to meet him, and it was still alive after a fashion. Whether it had crawled or whether it had been dragged by external forces, Amy could not know, but death had been at it. Everything had only happened in the last half hour, but collapse, greying and disintegration were already far advanced. There was a horrible bitterness. Dry fragments were scaling off. Amy could not touch it, but looked horrifiedly. Amy could not touch it, but looked horrifiedly into the distorted parody that had been her face. "What was it, Nahum? What was it?" he whispered, and the cleft, bulging lips were just able to crackle out a final answer. "It lived in the well. I seen it. A can of smoke. You can't get away from it. Draws ye. You know someone's coming down. But ain't no use. Sucks the life out." That was all. That which spoke could speak no more, because it had completely caved in. Amy reeled out the back door into the fields. He climbed the slope to the 10-acre pasture and stumbled home by the north road and the woods. Amy would never go near the place again. It is 40 years now since the horror happened. Something terrible came to the hills and valleys in that media, and something terrible still remains. I hope nothing will happen to Amy. He saw so much of the thing. Its influence was so insidious. He's such a good old man. I would hate to think of him as a grey, twisted, brittle monstrosity which persists more and more and more in troubling his sleep.